what is battery storage?
It's a fantastic solution for these short-term outages to prop up the grid. That's why we're seeing a huge push to get these batteries into play.
What does a landman do? How do they fit into these types of projects?
We've got to find a way, what they preach, but educate these landowners.
Every landowner, no matter where they're at in the country, can relate to not having power. And that's really what these projects are for. And that's an easy way to get in the door and kind of speak their language.
We talk about these projects all the time, but we don't get to really kind of dumb them down and like go through the basics. This will be a good just educational thing about what is battery storage.
Welcome to the Land Department Podcast. The state of land and energy as we see it.
Brett, we're going to try to make this work today. 5 people on a podcast.
We're rolling 5 deep. I'm just trying to keep these boys out the ditch. We got them battery boys. They got t-shirts and tattoos. We them battery boys. That's who we got on the podcast today.
The battery boys. Goodness.
Natalie covered her face.
Man. We probably should have started recording 20 minutes ago, but
no, we should not have. There's probably we might have lost half our business if you air the previous 10 minutes of conversation.
Man. Well, let's welcome them. So we got Patrick Derman. You are having a kid in the next 48 hours, most likely. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for giving us your precious time right now. I'm sure your wife's thrilled.
Yeah, very.
Yeah,
she's sleeping right now. So weird. I got to be quiet. I tend to yell.
She's sedated.
Yeah, very much.
And we got Blake
great.
Thomas here in our
Blake
Houston
Thomas.
office as well. And then, of course, everybody knows Natalie. And this is kind of continuing our just series of podcasts we want to do on renewable subject matter. And this is kind of like battery storage 101 was the concept for this. I mean, everybody hears BESS. Obviously, if you're in the BESS space, you understand what it is. But a lot of folks, a lot of landmen, independent landmen, a lot of folks in the oil and gas space are being approached by solar and battery storage developers, and they're talking about BESS. And what we wanted to do today is just kind of lay the basics. What is battery storage? What are some of the strategies for a landman? What does a landman do? How do they fit into that process, into these types of projects? Where do we see them fitting in? What are the trends that we're seeing? Just kind of basic stuff. So we got them battery boys in here to to kind of walk us through it. It's going to be kind of cool for me. I know we're doing a ton of this work, but these guys are living and breathing it. So they've got a lot of applicable kind of real world experience to share with us, both from an acquisition and a title standpoint. So I'm going to learn a little bit here as well. I mean, they're really in the weeds, and we talk about these projects all the time, but we don't get to really kind of dumb them down and like go through the basics. So that's what we're hoping with this. This will be a good, just educational thing about what is battery storage, how does the landman fit in, and what are we seeing on these projects. So thanks for coming on, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Let's start with just like, why is battery energy storage so important? Where is the future of this? Why is it such a hot topic?
Natalie, we got to
start?
figure
Let's
out
start
an
with
order.
Yeah, I'll just start calling.
Let's start
Hey,
now.
look, I'll jump in. Hey, feel free anytime, man. Feel free, just as much as I do about this stuff. So, battery energy storage is a huge component right now for our grid, especially here in Texas. And, these batteries, they could be 2-hour batteries, 4-hour batteries, but you can essentially attach them to these substations that need the backup support. And it's a fantastic solution for these short-term outages to prop up the grid. So that's why we're seeing a huge push, especially in Texas right now in the ERCOT market, to get these batteries into play. Pat, I know that you've been working primarily on some pretty large battery energy storage projects all over the country. Are you seeing anything different outside of Texas and your projects that you're running here?
Not necessarily. A lot of them are it's still the same parameters across the board, through our siting efforts. A lot of the same approach, which is still very relatable. I know all of us initially, and most of the folks in the land organization, we were oil and gas prior. My background, I was all surface. And so it's been a pretty easy transition. It's a lot of the same parameters that are set forward, but To answer your question, whether it's in Texas, Illinois, Indiana, wherever it may be, if you're up in the Northeast, it's the same parameters. You want to stay away from water. Your slope wants to be there. What are we looking at in terms of acreage? Once it falls within that, then it's the real challenge. It's getting the folks on board, finding the people. That's a whole nother set of challenges.
Yeah. Guys, where do we tend to see siting efforts focus for battery storage? So, or are they throughout the grid, or are they maybe closer to large metropolitan areas? Or are they always set up in conjunction with a solar development, or are they standalone just next to a substation? What kind of scenarios do we see these siting efforts really being focused
I think
at? What kind of locations?
it's capacity based, Brent. A lot of them POIs, points of interconnection. You see a lot of the targets initially being placed on those POIs, which can be typically substations. Other folks, they give us the tolerance and clearance to travel along T lines, transmission lines, and kind of give us an allowance as to how far they want to go, whether or not they want to actually tap into that T line, which then feeds back to the substation itself. So it's really a capacity thing and what the queue allows, depending on what market you're in. If you're in ERCOT, MISO, PJM, whatever it may be.
So the queue, or the ERCOT, for example, is going to dictate where they have capacity or where they need backup reserve capacity. Is that typically kind of what drives a developer, a battery storage developer, to look in a certain area? Or is it tax incentive based? Like, what's the economic driver behind it?
It's both. You're going to have a team of any developers are going to have a team of engineers that are really analyzing and looking at the data for the capacity on the various substations and lines. And then on top of that, they're going to be looking at opportunity zones, community zones, and other types of tax incentives that they can pull from the IRA. And those are going to be like your tier 1 acreage, right? If they meet all those parameters. But then we're also starting to see a lot of that tier 1 acreage be secured at this point. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing clients move into that tier 2 acreage. I always say the smart ones are the ones that are getting ahead of the curve and looking at tier 3 as well. I would anticipate, especially in Texas, the way that this is working with the growth in battery energy storage, that we'll probably see a battery on most substations. And you asked about battery and solar. They're standalone, and then some of them are BESS and PV. So it's both.
You'll see a project that may have started out as a solar project. They've got land capture. They've got a landowner that's willing to work with them, and maybe now that the market is more supportive of a battery storage campaign or increased battery storage, they can convert that solar project through their contracts they have with the landowner, maybe negotiating a new agreement, and maybe convert a portion of that to a battery storage project. Is that something that you guys see from time to time?
Yes. And let me be clear that we're talking about utility scale battery storage. There's also distributed battery storage. And so there is a little bit of a difference there. This is basically all focused on utility scale projects.
Okay.
What we're addressing.
All right. So Blake, I know you're doing some pretty big battery storage projects right now. What's Natalie pointed out, you've got the utility scale, and then you've got maybe the distributed, maybe that's terminology, I might have used the right terminology that time, projects. What's the size? Like if you're a landman and you're going to be working on a battery storage project, what can you expect? What kind of directives are we getting as far as the size of these projects? What do you see? What are we shooting for?
Typically for utility scale type of BESS project, you're looking for wanting to capture about 20 acres. Okay. And there's a little bit of give or take there. The closer you are to the sub, if you could tie directly in, you need a little less. If you're going to have to, get a right of way and build some sort of line to tie it back into the sub or transmission line, you're typically going to need another 10 acres to build some sort of additional infrastructure, switching station to get you tied around.
Okay, so it's not just batteries, it's batteries and then infrastructure that may be necessary to help push that electricity into the grid.
Absolutely.
And then it's also going to depend, your acreage is going to depend on how many megawatts you're going to need for that system. So for utility scale, it may be anything from 100 megawatts to 500 megawatts for a larger project. And the larger the project, the more batteries you're going to need. So when we're talking about batteries, imagine a shipping container, right? And within that shipping container, there's modules. There might be 5 different modules. And within those modules, there might be 100 batteries that slide into that module, right? So the more shipping containers you have, the more megawatts you can produce. And that's where you start getting the additional acreage. Some clients are more condensed in how they place their sites, and they can do more with less. We actually talked to somebody in Replus Atlanta that they were talking about wanting to see if they could start stacking their batteries to use less land.
A smaller footprint.
We'll see this. Yeah, we'll see this innovate. It's going to be very, very cool to watch the technology and how they're approaching these things over the next couple of years.
Yeah. Well, kind of thinking about how they approach them, Blake, what kind of agreements are customary in these? So you're a landman, you're working on a battery storage project. It's a utility scale type project. So you're looking for 20 to 30 acre parcels. How's that process? What types of agreements are they? Term, lease agreements, or do you see people trying to just outright buy land? Like, how's that process?
I'm glad you asked that, Brent, because that's actually one of our bigger challenges in acquiring this land for these projects. Is everything's kind of structured on an option agreement, so the developers actually just kind of pay the landowner for a 5-year period to evaluate how big of a project they need, if the grid can support it. So it's very rarely a straight up lease or sale or any type of situation. We're looking at a 5-year window. And judging on how backed up these queues are with a grid operator like ERCOT or MISO, dirt's not getting moved until year 4 or 5. So that's kind of a challenge that we face, trying to communicate to the landowners, like, yes, we want to sign up your land, we want to build this project, but it's going to be a while until dirt actually gets moved.
And that's a lot of the things I like to,
starting
explain to
with
these landowners too, what they ask, and especially in these areas that are oil and gas dominant. Why do y'all need a 5-year option? Well, we start to explain the variables that the developer has to run through, whether it's the permitting process. And I think Natalie could probably touch on that pretty well. I mean, what entails in this 5-year option? Why do they need that long?
Yeah,
So-
well, I can give you a very quick rundown. There's environmental studies that have to be done to make sure that the developers are properly respecting the environment. There's permitting, local governance that they need to navigate through, making sure that they have approval. They may have to rezone the land from agricultural to commercial use. So we've got to get through the title commitment policy and the mineral title and shared use agreements with oil and gas operators and surface waivers for mineral owners. So there's a lot that has to happen before they can actually construct easements. They've got to get easements. They've got to get the main study from the electrical service provider done, and that all has to pass forward.
Yeah. I think, as landmen, we know we can get things done quickly, right? So oftentimes the land work's done quickly. You can get your environmental work done quickly. You can get a lot of those things done. What tends to be the longest, the thing that really draws these projects out? Is it that interconnect authority or permitting on the interconnection side? Is that it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Yes, every market's different.
Yeah.
Yeah, ERCOT is one of the faster markets, which is why you see a lot of folks move in that
Focusing
direction.
here,
PJM, the PJM area, Pennsylvania, Ohio, that that area up there, it takes a long time. Yeah. I think they're battling 7 years right now, which is why we're not seeing as much up there as we're seeing in ERCOT, MISO, SPP, and then the southeast area, which would be Florida, Georgia, Mississippi. That's a whole different ball game. And then you get into WEC, which is your California, Rockies area. And those are all going to be very state dependent. As we know, California has a lot of legislation involved, a lot more than other areas.
That was polite.
Everywhere you go,
polite
it's
of you,
different.
Natalie.
Very, very polite. You running for office over there or something?
I did live in California for a year. I graduated from high school there. So my sister's still there. So I got to show some California love. even though I might not agree with them.
Cool. So, okay, guys. So we've talked through, generally what these projects are. We've discussed the size of the projects. We've talked about generally how the agreements are formed or structured. What's some of the down and dirty? Like, let's talk about, when back to what the Landman does. We've negotiated this option, right? Of whatever it is. Maybe it's an option. Is it an option to purchase? Is it an option to lease? If we do roll into a lease, what are those agreement structures like? How are the commercial terms? What are the commercial terms of a battery storage agreement with a landowner?
Lake and Pat, tell us about it, guys.
Go ahead, Blake.
It's really different from client to client. Typically, you see a really long, on the lease side, a 20 or 30-year initial term with several extensions on the back end of that. Because I think the goal for these types of projects is to get 2 life cycles out of the batteries. And my understanding, the life cycle is about 20 years apiece. So you're looking really for a 40-year, all in term. And for purchase option, I mean, when they start moving dirt and pick up that option, they own the land, so that gets picked up immediately, and it's theirs to own and keep.
Just an outright purchase. So long-term agreements like we see for, the solar type agreements, is it just a rental-based agreement? They're paying you an annual rental?
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
land, is that the basic structure?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that escalators typically are negotiated. It's part of the negotiation process.
1.5, 2%.
Yes, and that's becoming more and more important. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of helped combat inflation over the life of these agreements. And that's always the first thing that these people ask when they see these lease agreements is like, well, what if my land is worth, 2x, 3x more down the line? How are you guys going to compensate me for that? And that's when we deploy the escalator, kind of help smooth that over.
Yeah. Yeah. What's a dollar going to be worth 40 years from now?
Yeah.
Who knows?
And
so
you and I don't know, but we know it's going to be a lot less.
I think one of the interesting challenges.
Yeah.
I think one of the interesting challenges we run into a lot, I mean, it's all community relations too. And I keep speaking on Texas and the ERCOT market and oil and gas dominant. These people have dealt with it. Some of these folks for 40 plus years. And so they can't, there is a negative connotation. A lot of this is politically driven. So in the communities, I think to answer your question, whenever it comes to an option to purchase, some of these folks just want to be completely disengaged from the operation itself because they don't want their neighbor hating them, for lack of a better term. They don't want that tied into the community of, 1,000 people or less, and now they're the guy that sold out or the lady that sold out. So I think you see that a lot, and we tend to drive in that direction whenever that becomes the case. And sometimes it makes it easier to work with these folks. They want to work with you, but they don't want to be tied to that negative connotation per se.
Yeah. Well, I like anybody, an outright purchase, there's a value to $1 in my hand today,
Right.
than some form of $1, some fraction of $1 tomorrow. So I know that we have seen quite a bit of that in the battery space. It's maybe you get a lease agreement, but more so often it's just an outright purchase if you're able to get your project constructed. And so we'll do purchase options where if we'd decide to exercise that option, does a realtor come into place as a closing company, a title company, kind of facilitate that purchase or that process?
Yeah, it's going to depend on what market we're in and the real estate laws in that market on how the client is going to handle that, handle the transaction. Some states do require a realtor's license to be involved in it. Some do not. Many times it's going to be between the client. We don't really play a party to any sort of closing. Mm-hmm. It's going to be between the client and whatever title company they're using to get those final documents in place and actually close it out.
Yeah. I know on the Dudley Select Title side, I mean, we're starting to see and get a lot of opportunity in the battery storage space because of our closing. We're title companies, so we can close the transactions. We can support that. In other states, you're going to want to work with a land company, but you better have your title company ready to go to be able to close on these and transact on these deals. So that makes a lot of sense. What strategies do you guys see as far as how groups that are really focused on battery storage how are they utilizing Landmen in general? Are they just direct kind of contracting some people and having them in-house? Or are they working with groups like Dudley Land and others to kind of help them with these campaigns turnkey? What are some different models that you're seeing? What are the pros and cons of the different strategies for land and acreage capture or land capture?
We see both, but some of these we see a lot more with the BESS startups, truly, where they're coming in and they're engaging us in the very beginning, and we're sort of serving as their full land department as they develop their company, as they define their structure, they engage us to help them develop their acquisition program and their systems and processes. And then we see them put those uh, uh, land professionals in place within their company, or expand the departments that they already have. So that's been really cool because we're helping those people go ahead and develop a program, and it helps them get what they need to build their pipeline, and then they're able to build and expand off of that. Now that means as they build and expand that they use us less, but it's okay because we helped them get where they needed to be.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Do we see groups that are battery centric? Is there more volume? I would imagine there's got to be more just volume than a company that's maybe focused on putting solar projects together. What do we see there, guys? Pat, a typical battery storage project, is it, going to be looking at multiple counties? Is it how many? What do we tend to see from these
For
startups?
the most part, a lot of these groups, whenever they approach us, especially if we've never worked with them before, what's the best strategy going forward? In my opinion, you cast the net as wide as you can. You want to catch as many fish as possible. And I think it's the most efficient approach too for our guys that we're deploying. One, it keeps them busy. We can keep a full-time agent on the project as a whole, but it gives us more opportunity time. We can come through and very quickly kill an area based off the sentiment that's received internally. You run from there, and it's not this constant building out. We want to be proactive in our effort. And so if we can approach and a lot of it's convincing and educating and saying, here, this is what we've seen in the past. It works. Let's cast that net and let's go approach, 4 or 5 different counties if possible. I do think that's the best approach there rather than trying to hone in on one specific area. Now, once you kind of drill that in, you say, okay, there is some interest here. We can work in this. Then you really start to prioritize your focus there. But I think initially you just cast it as far as you can, wherever there's allowance, and run with it.
Okay, so step one is, hey, I'm using an example, these are 10 areas that we like from an interconnect standpoint, from a permitting standpoint, whatever it may be. Your land team is going to go out, and you're seeking expressive interest. You're trying to find the path of least resistance for a percentage of those sites. As you've gotten expressions of interest, then you're moving deeper. You're then starting to work and really drill down to actual sites.
And a lot.
Say you've got.
Go ahead, Brent. Sorry.
No, just say you've got 3 sites selected. Like, okay, and I have 3 favorable expressions of interest, favorable areas. What happens next? How do you vet those to find the best ones?
Really, and it's an issue we run into continuously. What are your tier 1 spots? Well, everybody's, to an extent, maybe a lack of a better term, they're self-cannibalizing. It's continual competition. So how long has this been going on? We need to run lease checks on all this first and foremost, because that can save the client a ton of money, save them a lot of time and heartache. Because you can, in reality, if you threw 10 spots list, I'd be willing to bet at least 25% of them you could probably kill because there's existing leases there. There's competition in the area. And so that is one of the
you're late to the game.
Yeah. And it's who's there, who has been there, and how can you strategize internally, and how can we convey our messages to what we're seeing on the ground that says this is the right approach, and is there allowance internally with some of these developers that say we can go and approach these tier 2, tier 3, and in my opinion that is the future. Eventually those have to become tier 1 because you've got nothing else.
Yeah. And I guess there's economic factors, commercial factors there. How many miles of T-line are we going to have to run? All those things probably come into play. But if you're a battery storage group, that's what you need to be thinking of, right? Is how late to the game am I? I mean, everybody calls us day one and says, we want to be in the triangle of Texas between
and you're going to
Dallas,
pay the
Houston,
price
and
too.
Austin.
You will pay the price. If you want to be in these hot areas, the dollar amount's gone up. It's reality.
Yeah. Yeah, it's supply and demand, right? How big's your wallet?
Very simple.
Oh.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Guys, I don't know if it reminds you of this, Blake and Pat, and you tell me, but to me, it's very reminiscent of the startup of Shell Plays, right? Like what we saw in 2010 in the Utica, what we saw in 2008 to 2014 in the Eagle Ford, and the Barnett up in Dallas. Like when everybody's going after the same stuff, and everybody's trying to move at warp speed to secure their land position.
How did
And
you get it done?
that's
You
where we're at
paid.
with BESS right now.
You paid and you paid and you paid.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's what it boils down to. Money talks, and we find companies that want to come in and nickel and dime and try to find a deal, and that's fine. It's just you limit your probability of having a project that you can do something with. And I think that's always the big thing that is important for a landman. If you're a landman and you're working a battery storage project or you're running a project and you're dealing with a client that's maybe new to your area, maybe they've put projects together in another state, now they're working and they've got you doing a battery storage in Mississippi. Well, if you're a developer on a battery side, the more local knowledge you can get, the better. You want to be outreach. You want to try to figure out, okay, where's the price point? Because sometimes you only get one chance to insult somebody.
Yeah.
or
Not the truth.
You know what I mean? I mean, I hate to think negative like that, but you really have to think about that. Sometimes you have one chance. You sit down with someone and they say, well, what are you paying? And if you throw some weak number out there, well, then sometimes it's hard to call back and get an audience. Or you waste time hitting 10, 15, 20, 50 different owners and throwing a low ball number out there that's not going to get you any traction. Well, then you've wasted time and you've lost some credibility, and maybe your competition is out there. So kind of that first week, 2-3 weeks of working in a new area really needs to be focused on, was like, where do we need to be commercially?
The price point.
Right, let's talk about that time waste, because that brings up the whole time waste principle brings up a really good point. There are a lot of things that happen in the beginning of these BESS acquisitions that at this juncture in these hot areas are a complete waste of time, in my opinion. And some of those, I think, are the mass bulk mail outs. Everybody's getting hit up right now. They're getting calls. They're getting too many spam calls. They're not answering numbers they don't know. They're throwing mail away. They're getting hit up every day. And so how are you going to set yourself apart? How are you going to be different? What are you going to do to be able to get these folks' attention? And that's where it comes to the talent of the landmen on your team, making sure that they're getting in front of these people, that they're researching, they're getting in front of the decision makers, if it's a trust or if it's a large family, and really drilling down and forming those personal relationships, building the trust with those landowners so that you can get things contracted quicker. We've gotten to the point now where we're skipping over all of the semantics and just going straight to traditional old land work and face-to-face conversations.
Yeah. Blake, I know you've got some pretty large efforts. Maybe expand on that a little bit. What's obviously we know, shaking a hand and seeing someone, it's a lot easier to have a conversation and establish trust and answer questions. With that, it takes more time, right? It's a more of a commitment, an investment in time and someone to be able to find that person, make that contact. What's a good, when you start a project and you've got, say, 40 or 50 sites, how many people do you think, landmen you need for that type of outreach effort?
Yeah, I think it just kind of depends on what part of the country we're looking at and how spread out they are. I think a team, 4 salt agents and a crew chief to kind of stay on and make sure everyone's going in the right direction and not overlapping on families and contacting the same people twice is a really good model. And to bring up something that Natalie said earlier, we want to get wins as quickly as possible, especially in these high competition areas. And, communicating with the landman and the developers on how can we structure these offers and think a little bit outside of the box. Because an area like Texas has been so hot since the IRA passed a couple of years ago that we're seeing, we're kind of in the second cycle, a lot of these option agreements. A lot of these folks have been burned by flippers that have thrown out outrageous numbers that have really upset the market. And it's really communicating with our landmen that, hey, we're dealing with developers that know what we're doing, that are actually going to build these projects. We might be coming in a little low, but if we can, incentivize with an option payment that's a little higher in the first year, so these people feel comfortable with us, it goes a really long way.
Yeah, it buys you some credibility. And that's, I guess with anything, it's education. It's the age-old thing.
100%.
When you're
Yeah,
trying
we're
to
dealing
convince-
with surface here, and it's just people have such a much more intimate relationship with the land. So these discussions are going to go a little longer than you typically see in oil and gas, but that's just the name of the game.
Yeah, it's a new thing, right? I mean, that's the takeaway. It's, and anytime you're trying to convince, and we say new now in these saturated markets, it's less new than before, but it's becoming more known by landowners, right? But if you're going into a new state that maybe is just starting to pick up, just starting to get active with battery storage, and you're a developer, you need to be factoring in some time, right? What's Pat? What would you foresee if you're going into a new area that maybe isn't as active? What do you need? Do you need a week or two? Should you expect a week or two of just kind of build up and time to contact people, time to kind of articulate what battery storage is and get people off center?
Yeah, I mean, it is, it goes back to having strong agents that are knowledgeable of, what are you trying to sell? What are you trying to sell to these folks? And again, it's acknowledging and recognizing the political divide that, based off of certain states. And I think you could just follow a map, whether the map's red or blue. How do they feel? What's the sentiment? What are you getting into? And I think we can judge that ahead of time. And it's communicating with the developer as well. What are their expectations, providing, company history, any details. It's just items that can get these folks more comfortable with you, know you as a friend more so than another telemarketer, another person handing out a flyer or putting something on your door.
To flip their...
Yeah. So it's really bridging that gap. And on our end, I think recognizing the political divide. And I don't want to get into politics by any means, but it's reality. I mean, whether you hear it on Fox News or you hear it on CNN, it's good or bad. And it's knowing the facts and presenting the facts and educating these landowners along with our agents as well. And that's a lot of what we do. It's a lot of our job.
I'll tell you one thing. BESS seems to be a lot easier for everybody involved than wind or solar when you get into the political conversations.
It is.
So, yeah.
I think a lot of it too boils down to footprint. It's
a
small footprint. It's sizable. You're in oil and gas areas. You can very much so relate that footprint to pad site, whatever it may be. It's not the swath of we need all of your land. We need
processing facility or yeah.
And every landowner, I mean, no matter where they're at in the country, can relate to not having power. And that's really what these projects are for. And that's an easy way to get in the door and kind of speak their language. Like, I know solar projects are huge and they're tough to look at, but this will actually help you in your community. And if they have a buy-in to their community, they really relate to that.
Well, and not only that, but let's talk about a residential scale for a minute. There's a lot of companies right now that are doing battery energy storage on homes, so people are opting out of buying generators and putting batteries, Tesla batteries, or even Generac makes batteries, and they're putting these on their home. There's a new company, Michael Dell's son, started in Austin called BESS Energy, and they are putting battery packs on houses, connecting them back to the grid, and then using it as a distributed system, meaning that even though you have a residential battery on your house, you're not paying for the battery, you're paying for installation. And then you're signing up for a monthly membership or whatever, and then your power from that battery is feeding back to the grid to support during outages in your little localized area. So people are getting a lot more educated about batteries maybe than they are, large scale wind or solar or what have you. And I think that we're starting to experience a little bit of that in the ease of negotiating some of these deals with them. Becoming more palatable.
And then as our population increases, as Teslas and EVs become way more common, as we've seen over the last 3-4 years. I mean, you see them everywhere. 4 years ago, really didn't, especially in Texas. We've got to find a way and, what they preach, but educate these landowners. We got to stabilize the grid, and it's continually a hot topic, and we keep talking about it. And this is the resolve, and I think you're going to continue to see a heavy push, obviously, as supply and demand follow one another.
We talked a little bit about, obviously the activity that we see here in Texas. What are the hotbeds right now for battery storage projects, for battery acquisition projects? And we don't have to go specifically, but we're active, obviously, in Texas. We all know that. Everybody knows that. What other markets are emerging, or maybe were active and have kind of leveled out? What are we seeing nationally?
Everywhere. Everywhere. It's the answer. Brett, we've done projects in Virginia, DC, Mississippi, all the way to Tennessee, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York. It was really, really hot in Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, and Michigan for a while, kind of that little strip right there. We're seeing a whole lot in Texas. We've seen some in New Mexico. Colorado changed their laws. California changed their laws. So they were hot, then they were not. Yeah. So we're even seeing stuff going on up in North Dakota and out in Oregon. So it is literally everywhere where there is capacity available and where there are favorable, the developers tend to go where the queue times are going to be easier
Shorter.
for them to work with. So that's where we see the workflow. It's really interesting because we'll get a lot of Texas projects, and then, the next week, all of a sudden I'll get a project in a random state, and the week later I've got another client with a project in that same random state. So you can sort of follow the trends around, but still that Midwest area, it's stayed sustainably hot. Texas has stayed sustainably hot. The only reason we're not seeing large utility scale up in the Northeast coast is just footprint and availability of land. That tends to be distributed generation up there. And so we're not seeing that utility scale up there because they just run a different model.
What's the difference? Distributed generation, what's the...
So distributed generation, it's going to be more where their utility scale is larger. All right. So that's going to be a larger footprint, a higher megawatt, and they're going to be on the very large transmission lines. Okay. Distributed generation is going to be on your distribution line. So they're going to be going through the lines of a local operator. It's going to be a smaller megawatt, and it's going to be to power a more centralized area or support back up to a more centralized area.
Okay.
So it's not going to be on the overall utility, but through the distributor.
Okay.
And with the challenges that they have, it's a very condensed area. When you get off from Maryland all the way up to New York, Boston, all of that, they don't have a lot of times 20, 30 acres available. You've got to move outside of those cities to do that. But they can put smaller 1 acre, 5 megawatt batteries in, and then use them within the distribution system to still prop the grid up in the same way. It's just a much smaller footprint in a different capacity.
So just more localized networks that really can only support a smaller battery project than a larger scale like we see in other places. Okay. That makes sense.
It's a high level overview. We'll do that on maybe another podcast.
Explanation for a landman. Good enough. So, all right. So we've talked about acquisition. We've talked about, all the things that kind of support it and where the activity is. What's the title process for these? I mean, obviously we're landmen. We do a lot of work on the title front. We do issue title policies for battery storage projects and solar projects. Where does the landman fit in? How do you conduct title? Are there certain times that you maybe want to initiate a mineral review? What's the process there?
Ideally, we'd get on it as soon as possible. I know that Blake and Pat really push all of our clients when they're in the acquisition project process to let's start talking about your mineral title early on. It would be great if when we get a signed option agreement, we immediately roll into the mineral title right then to get that vetted and figure out where we stand with that. But unfortunately, we see everybody doing a lot of different things, and so we're working really hard as a team to try to influence and uh, push folks into dealing with this title early on.
So the same drivers that we see and that we preach on the solar side, like, hey, you need to know your minerals early, are applied to these battery storage projects. There's got to be some difference, right, as far as exposure, between a 30 or 40 acre battery storage project versus 1,000 acre solar project. How do we see underwriters approaching insuring battery projects versus a solar project? What's the differences? What are the factors there?
They seem to be a little more forgiving with the battery projects than they do the solar projects, just because of the size and the
I guess the exposure.
impact.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's much more limited. Sometimes I've seen battery projects that are just one large piece of land. It might be a piece of a large piece of land. I've also seen them make up multiple small pieces into one. So I think just depending on the footprint, the less tracks and owners you have involved, the less exposure you're going to have. And they might be a little bit more lax with you in that regard.
I know that we see variations of some underwriters are more or less risk averse when it comes to these projects. So it's important.
Yes.
God Dudley Selects carved out some business just by being pliable, because we can go to different underwriters. Maybe some companies we see, well, we only use X. And what we always encourage our clients to do is don't be closed off to what underwriter you're going to work with. There are options. Different underwriters will look at particularly these battery storage projects differently than others. So it's important as a developer to kind of keep an open mind to who you work with from an insurance standpoint on these projects, because it may be the difference in whether you have to really go down a wormhole on your minerals or not, based on the factors of your project. And obviously the takeaway is every project's unique and different. But you can't avoid the mineral review. You need to understand and know what your exposure is, but then you also need to know that you have options, right? Are those things that we're seeing guys on our projects that they tend to go different paths, or it's pretty straightforward on how they get to insurability? Or really, are we even there yet with some of these projects? I know we're in the land grab. What are we seeing? Are we seeing, I don't know, I may be putting you on the spot, but like, how many battery storage projects have been constructed in Texas in the last 12 months? I don't know that I know.
Quite a few actually. We have clients in all different phases. We have some clients who are already constructing their site. We have some clients who are just starting to construct, and we have some that construction's not even on the radar yet, right? So it's all different, just depending on each different client has their own methodology and system and has their own pace. Some move faster than others. Typically, our smaller clients are a lot more nimble and we'll move at I should say our medium-sized clients are a lot more nimble and will move at a faster pace. So it's all over the place. Happy to take you and show you one that is actually being constructed now in the greater Houston area.
Yeah, I'm starting to see it. I know some of our solar clients have actually converted portions of their projects to battery storage, and seeing those pretty interesting. But I think we've covered a lot. Thanks to them battery boys.
When you fit it in my shirt,
for just kind of sharing your. Yeah, I guess I got to get another T-shirt and me and my stupid hat. Thanks for kind of giving your perspectives, guys. Natalie, obviously, thank you for everything you do, kind of helping steer our efforts at doubling land on this front. Hopefully, we were able to give some good base level information for landmen out there and developers and clients on kind of how things come together and some things they maybe need to consider when they're putting these projects together. So look forward to maybe continuing the conversation as things evolve, and I'm sure we'll find some nuance that we can dig into. But Pat, Blake, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us on.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Brett.
Thank you.
Hey, I'll just say you can't have anybody better than Pat and Blake.
And you also
on
can't
each
have
side.
them,
We're doing
people.
these BESS.
Yeah.
Can't have that.
They already got Dudley
Oh, that's
tattoos.
fine.
I
They
my
got Dudley
tattoo.
tattoos, so they can't
Battery
go
boy.
anywhere.
Got my brand.
Simply the best.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
I love it.
Thanks for listening to The Land Department. Check out our website in the show notes or visit dudley-land.com to learn more about us.